Recording in progress. Okay, there we go. Yay. Okay, folks. Thank you for rolling with me on this one. I really, I appreciate that. So we will continue.
Constructing the sleeves, adding the French binding. Now, this is one little trick that I like to show you when you're basting the sleeve, the undersleeve. Because you need to sew through everything, but you don't want to catch the rest of the sleeve when you're sewing. So as you can see here, just zoom in here, I've pinned and I've come in along here and I'm sewing the running stitch, but what you don't see is the ruler. So having a plastic ruler between the two layers, you can see the reflection here. What that will do is that will simplify your stitching. So you don't have to really guess. You hit the ruler, you don't end up sewing the layers together, and it's a bright idea. Now we join the ends. First, notice I've overlapped.
Real quick, do you have any tips for getting that sleeve all the way under the presser foot, or are you turning it inside out, or?
This is where having a free arm on your machine is going to be a real lifesaver. Because that's really what I did is I kind of raised the presser foot. I slipped the entire sleeve onto the arm, armhole first, and then, finish where the cuff, and then kind of worked backwards with the free motion, kind of sliding it off the arm to my left. And then I finished up, with the seam, it ended up finishing up at the underarm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
And did you still do the applique with the motifs, or did you just show?
No, it is exactly the same. That's why I didn't really show it, because I figured it might be a little bit redundant.
Okay.
But it is the applique seam, and you do trim the upper and the under layers. And the seam, as I remember, I want to say that is part of the stitching. So yeah, it's going to look, it's going to look like there's no seam there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Love it.
Kenneth, just one question.
Yeah.
You said you free armed the sewing, and you started with the cuff, and then
no, actually what I did is you raise the presser foot, you feed the sleeve all the way on. You lead with the armhole. And so when you slide it, so when you slide it to the right, the cuff is then going to be poking out, or the free arm will be poking out from the cuff. And so then when you're sewing, you're going to be free arm sewing from right to left, so that as you're working, the sleeve is sliding to the left and off of the free arm.
Okay, thank you. I just needed clarity on that. Thank you.
Okay, so other questions? Okay, then back to the story.
2 organza strips. You can just overlap them, make sure the folded edges match. Then you can trim that out. And there we are. From here, what you want to do is you want to fold back here and fold back here. You want to make sure that these meet, because that is going to be where you're going to put your seam. It is roughly where your underarm seam is. It doesn't have to hit dead on in this case because you can't see the seam. So what I'm going to do here then is I'm going to pin here and here. And then just come in with the iron. You don't have to really hit it over the head, but you want to put a little crease there, and a little crease here. That will be the stitching line when we continue. So now, take your pen, going to mark. This is a stitching line here. And this one here. Marking is rather important here, so don't try to get away without doing this. Okay, so I have both of these marked. The next step will be pinning them. So what you're going to do is you want to put them right sides together. Make sure you don't get them twisted, because that's mighty frustrating. So put a pin here, make sure that that comes out there, close enough. So you're going to pin these two stitching lines, one on top of the other. I'll check them. Here we go, sorry. So those are pinned, one on top of the other. So now what I will do is I will go off camera and sew these on the sewing machine and bring it back to show you the results. So here we've sewn, and this is where I'm going to get out my little tiny sleeve board. This is my Barbie sleeve board for seam roll. What I will do here is slip this over and press this seam open. You could use a point presser as well. I like this better because you don't have to worry about the edges of the point presser leaving impressions in the fabric.
Can I ask, did you make that yourself?
I did. It's just, you can see there's a little finishing nail there. I ran some glue along where I wanted it to lay on the point presser. And I think there's 2 or 3 finishing nails as well to anchor it down. But yes, when you make Barbie clothes, you have to press the seam allowances on the sleeves open. And so this makes that really possible. Okay.
And the next step really is to trim the seam allowances to about 1/8 of an inch. Voila. Now we're going to do a little more pressing, and then we can then sew this by machine. So our next step here, like I said, we're going to fold this back, and I will steam this down. You don't want to, again, you don't want a hard crease there. Just want to give it a little bit of steam, pat it in place. Now this is where we want to actually put all of this together. And if you need to, you can take out some of this basting. If I make it a little easier, so if you pick out the basting, so you can turn this all back. So I'll do here, there we are. Turn this back like so. Then pin it in place. See, the nice thing about a bias strip is that if it stretches a little bit, which is what this has done, you can sort of ease that back in. So our next stop is the sewing machine. So we begin by, again, putting on the quilting foot. And so since we want the stitches to continue on, I'm going to put the needle down about 1/4 of an inch back from the end of that stitching. Then so I'm using a stiletto because sometimes I find, especially if you have to ease something that has been stretched, it makes your life a little easier by holding everything nice and flat. This is also, I am deeply grateful that I have a free arm on this machine. Here we're coming up on the other side. And I will just blend stitches in like so. The result here, a little bit of pucker there, doesn't show on that side though. But now notice this here, that little extra there. I'm not going to sweat that. I'm going to go in and trim that out because you don't really need it now. Everything is caught. So then, once I've trimmed that out, we'll go back to the pressing table. So here we are, as you can see, I have fixed that. So the next step before I trim this off is you want to press seam allowances towards the strip, away from the body. And from here, come in and this off here, a little easier. Trim down these seam allowances. So there we have it. And again, you just want to check and see if this comes up and over, and yay, it does. So we will go now back to the work table to baste and hand finish. As you can see here, I've basted the bias strip in place, and I've turned the sleeve inside out because I find it a little easier to do the hand sewing if the sleeve is inside out. So I'm going to come here and anchor my thread. And this is a simple slip stitch. That's really what this is. You want the tension not to be too tight so it doesn't create ripples. And you want the stitches to be fairly close together. So what you're going to do is you're going to catch just right underneath that row of stitching. And then catch just behind the fold, not right on top of the fold, just behind. And so you're going to work back and forth all the way around. Also a few more stitches, and then go off camera and complete the rest. The object here is you want it invisible as best you can make it. You notice I'm sewing with a double thread. You could sew with a single thread. I personally prefer double threads. I hate when the thread comes out of the needle. Okay, so there's what it looks like from the back. That's what it will look like from the front. The basting will come out when we're done. So I will continue on around and meet you back on the other end. You're coming on the end. And so I'm going to secure the thread. Bury the end of the thread.
Can I just say something as a surgeon?
Yes.
It is so cool that there's this like crossover that happens between like actual surgery
Okay.
and sewing. Like we bury the end like that in surgery too. It's just really cool. That's all.
Well, that's good to know. You know, 'cause I remember a friend of mine. She had a friend of hers was a doctor, and she said that one of the things they made them practice was their hand stitches.
Well, my ex-husband always used to say that all my sewing cross-trained me for surgery, and all my surgery cross-trained me for sewing.
Well, you know,
Yes.
I think that,
Surgeons, I will say surgeons are generally working with a very narrow seam allowance.
yes, I meant.
Well, no, but it's like this stitch is essentially how you would sew an animal together after you spayed them or neutered them or did abdominal surgery. It's exactly this way.
Okay, well, that's good to know. That's interesting.
Anyway, sorry, I'm sorry, mindless trivia.
No, but that's okay. You know, it's, you know, it crossover. We all learn something. Okay, so
maybe it was TMI for some people. So to them, I
okay.
apologize.
No, I have a TMI story, but we'll wait until this is over.
Short for voila. Now the next step will be removing the basting, and I will meet you over at the pressing table. Here we are. Little bit of steam. Here we have it. French binding.
Thanks.
Our next step is going to be applying the binding to the body.
And that will be next week. So, questions? Okay, so the TMI story that I had, this is years ago, when my first book was published. I was at this party in San Francisco, and it was, you know, a bunch of like gay men my age. And then there was this one youngster, you know, and so everyone was chatting, and someone had mentioned that I had just published a book. And he, of course, he's like, well, what's the book about? I said, oh, you wouldn't know it. And he said, well, tell me. I said, well, it's a sewing book. And he said, you're Kenneth King. I'm like, I guess I am. And then, you know, we were chatting about sewing and how he talked about how much he loved it. And I said, and so how did you get into sewing? And he said, I work at a mortuary. And that particular bit of information kind of blew past me. Everyone else, of course, was like, and so he started talking about the tools that he used, and he was talking about an S-curve needle, because he said, I really hate when the S-curve needle, when it comes unthreaded in the middle of a stitch. And at that point I went, and it was, you know, it was just one of those, just like, I work in a mortuary. So yes.
Well, he'll be good at makeup then.
Well, that too, but it was interesting because, it's like, it was such a random thing. You're Kenneth King. Well, yeah, actually I am. It's like, I sew. Well, really, you do? Yeah, I work in a mortuary. Ah. So yes, that was an Indeed moment. I don't know if have I told you all the story about Indeed? Well, for those who haven't heard it, my mother had a lawyer named Harry. Harry was the voice of reason when I was growing up. Harry looked like George Burns. And so there was one time I had to testify in court when I was 14, long story. And so he kind of sat me down for one of our, conversations about how things work in the real world. And he said, these are two bits of information that will really serve you well for the rest of your life. The first thing is, if they ask a question, you answer the question and then you shut up. Like if the answer is yes, it's yes. That's it. Drove my mother crazy. She would ask me a question. I would answer the question. I would stand there. She's like looking at me. I'm like, what? I answered your question. The other thing was, if someone says something that requires a response and you just don't know what to say, you say indeed. Because that puts the ball back in their court. You've not really said anything. I have used that so many times. Like when I was on Martha Stewart, I knew that she liked Fortuny, and I knew that we weren't going to hang out in the green room together because she was Martha Stewart and I was not. And so I wore my Fortuny jacket, and we were introduced maybe a minute before we were to go on. That is how short a time I got with her. And so I said, Fortuny, but you knew that already. And she went into this lovely little reverie about how she loved Fortuny, and she had some, the fabrics in her house in Connecticut, some in her apartment here in New York, and all of this. And then she turned and looked at me moments before we were to go on. And she looked me square in the eyes and said, did you know that cat pee dissolves the gold paint off that fabric?
Indeed.
And I said, indeed. And they said, you're off. And the next day, one of my students had watched this, and she said, oh my God, Professor, you like totally bossed Martha Stewart around. I said, I have no memory of what happened after.
You were just
I was thinking was, there's only one way she could know that, is because, So yes, Indeed works really well.
It does. I have used it.
Yeah.
After hearing that story on your podcast, it's like, it works.
Yeah, you don't have to say a word.
That's the most common word my partner says to me.
Really? Okay. Huh. Okay. So questions about, yes.
I have something.
Vicky,
All right. So I noticed in the video, you had a blue cutting mat underneath the green one, and it looked like it was large.
Actually, it's not a cutting mat. It's a big one of those fold up cardboard tables.
Oh, I see. I see.
Because I work in a very small space. You have seen it. And so the table, when I don't need a work table like that, it folds up and goes in a box.
All right.
And,
okay. So my question is that my cutting mat is like 20 years old, and I can't see some of the lines. So I was on the web trying to find a large cutting mat, and I can't find a source. So do you have a recommendation of where I could find a large
Olfa cutting mats? OLFA, Olfa.
Yeah.
That's the cutting mat I have, and that is
that's the green one though.
Yeah, it's the green one. Yeah.
And you like it?
I do very much.
Yeah. I have a small one.
Yeah.
But the large one is like white, I guess it's white.
Well, but the Olfa cutting mats are kinder to your cutting blades.
Are they?
Because they're different kinds, and some of them dull the blade much more quickly than the Olfa.
Yeah.
Now, Olfa used to, I don't know if they still do. This is back when this is 100 years ago, and they gave it to me for a 40th birthday present. So that tells you how long ago it was. But they used to make just the green, because it's gray on the other side. And this one's black on the other side. But it was like, you could get like a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet, because my table in my studio in San Francisco was a 4 foot by 8 foot table. And so I could just, I basically, this was the new tabletop for that table. So I had this big uninterrupted space. But, check with Olfa. Those are the ones I use. Those are the ones I'm happiest with.
All right. I was trying to steer away from that from the green. For some reason, I just don't like, I have it under my sewing machine as an Olfa, and I use it when I'm just like trimming stuff as I'm sewing. So I just need another one because it really bothers me that I can't see all the lines anymore because I've
Yeah.
done
So
it
that,
on the same space over and over
you know,
again.
yeah. So that's, you know, that would be
All
my,
right, thank you.
okay. So other questions?
No.
No questions. Okay. So if you haven't had your office hour, please, you know, contact me for your office hour. And I will, let's hope that this whole thing came through on a recording. I imagine that since the meeting was still up, that it probably was still recording, but I will, you know, it might be in 2 pieces, but I will download the recordings and I will also download, you'll get the links for the video that's contained within the lesson as well. Okay.
Great.
So I'll stick around for a couple more minutes, but if you need to go and do something else with your Saturday, like go out and enjoy the weather or something, I will not take it personally if you leave.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Take care.
Glad you showed back up.
Next week.
Oh,
Glad you were
God.
able to get back on.
Well, you know, that things like that just make me just crazy because, you know, it was like, I don't know what to do, but happily it came back. So thank you for kind of keeping things rolling while I was gone. I really appreciate that.
Oh, I was happy to be able to do it. So
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm using a friend's computer and I can't find the leave button. There it is.
Okay.
I'll get in touch. Thank you very much. Great
Okay,
day.
take care.
Bye.
you take care.
Enjoy
Have
your
a good
weekend.
Saturday.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Kenneth. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Okay, you too.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.